Great. Thanks a lot, Ajinkya and Abhimanyu, for joining us and sharing your journey to INSEAD with us. We will be starting with our first section for this interview, which is called Pick Your Fit. And Ajinkya, maybe I could start with you here. Uh, Deciding which school to select for your MBA degree is a big question mark that everyone has while selecting schools, right? So, if I could ask you, what were the broad themes that were guiding your school selection, and what was in particular about INSEAD that appealed to you the most?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the very first question which came to my mind as well when I started. And there are a lot of kind of contradictory or a lot of even the rankings per se, if you see out there. So, every Financial Times, Economist, Business Week, each of them have their own rankings. So, we can't really say that, one is right and the other is wrong, because it's just a matter of the lens of, through which you see each of those rankings. So, for me, it was more about what I want to do post MBA. So I had made up of mind that I want to get into consulting. So that was the first filter right there. The second one is I had very specifically decided that, considering my profile and what careers which I want to do, I wanted to target one of the top 10 to 15 schools, and not anything outside of that. So that became a second criteria for me. And probably the third one was also in terms of the geography of the school. So while I was a bit flexible of where I would want to work post MBA, but still that played a critical role in deciding the school list which I made. Specific to INSEAD, I would say the one thing which appealed to me the most was the diversity piece, because if you see the US schools, so while they have a certain percentage of diversity in the class, predominantly it tends to have more of Indian, Chinese, or American nationals. And for me, the entire objective of doing an international MBA and putting that much money was uh, really meeting a lot of different people from different backgrounds, nationalities, and getting that learning experience. And one thing which INSEAD does uniquely is they put a cap in terms of any nationality intake that they took. So they take. So it's like 10% limit in terms of any nationality which comes in. So which is what I found very interesting. And combined with the fact that you also get to switch around the campuses and so on. So this factors kind of played a role for me to finalize on INSEAD as definitely one of the top schools, with few other schools to just manage my risk strategy of applying to the schools.
I think very well said. All the factors that you mentioned, I think INSEAD is one of the schools which sort of checks all these boxes, right? Whether you're looking at whether it's consulting, its rankings, diversity factor, multiple campuses. So I think INSEAD has definitely got it all, and we would explore more of that in depth in the following sections as well. But great to know that these were some of the key factors that you actually factored in while you applied to INSEAD. Abhimanyu, if I can just quickly come to you now. It's a very unique pivot for somebody like you. You come from the music industry. It's really unheard of. It's not a layman's profile, right? It's highly unique. So while INSEAD now competes with the top, US heavyweights, the Ivy Leagues in the world, and it's still managed to be in the top five for so many years right now. What really prompted you to pick INSEAD over these top US schools or Ivy Leagues? And what do you recommend to aspirants who will be applying in the following year? How should they select? How should they go about doing this Europe versus US decision?
Okay, so the reason why I even picked, say, any European school over the US, one, I stayed in the US for 2 years, so I was studying and playing music at the same time. So for me, I've experienced that culture, and it's something that it depends on personal fit, and I didn't personally feel that it was a great fit for me. I actually did get into a US university as well, but that was never my priority. Primarily for the reasons that I mentioned, that there are visa issues. You have to think about your work permit, and especially from the entertainment industry, they don't necessarily sponsor there. So for me, it was that was one of the reasons why I was not very keen on the US to begin with. Post that, it's if you think about why INSEAD, one, it's very well connected. The companies that I wanted to work for do come and recruit at INSEAD, and no matter what my profile is, it the uniqueness is something that INSEAD sells you on, and that's essentially what I was bringing. I was bringing a very unique profile there, and they made me feel very welcome. So the professors who I spoke to, the alumnus who I spoke to, they were very keen to kind of have me in a class because they were like, "Hey, listen, the music industry, that's very different. No one really comes and does this." But that really worked for me. So I was made to feel welcome, and the alumni were very nice to approach. So they were very quick to come back to me with answers. So they didn't take their time. The professors who were willing to do Skype calls, they even met me in person. So for that, for me, it just really built on the appeal of, apart from the whole business school ranking, the location, INSEAD being, a grade in terms of brand value across the world. Apart from that, it was just like this feeling of coming kind of like I can call this place my home, even if it's for like 10 or 12 months. I think that was very important to me, which is something that I didn't quite feel when it came to like a US based school. So that was why we can see it.
Right. I think you made some very interesting points, Abhimanyu, and this is quite a story that we keep hearing in our interviews. People often tend to undermine the fit part of the category. They only get blindsided by the rankings, and you emphasize that you spend time to understand the school, you spend time to understand the community, and because you realize that the school fit with your aspirations, and not because it was just a top ranked school, that was not enough. I think that's a very valid way of looking at it. And for people who are watching this interview, maybe something for them to draw. Another beautiful thing that comes out of your answer and your profile is there is no one fit kind of a profile for an MBA. Even the top schools are looking for, in fact, top schools are looking more for diversity. And for people who are unsure whether MBA after untypical kind of a profile is the right degree to follow. I think for them, a lot of things coming out of this. Ajinkya, if I could, just ask you this same question. You, on the other hand, come from, you've done your education from IIT, and we see a lot of people following and going to the top schools. How did you decide between this US versus Europe confusion? What were your guiding factors behind picking Europe? And of course, visa would have been somewhere in that, but if some of the other factors you could throw some light at.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, as you mentioned, visa was definitely a big factor. The other piece was I was quite specific that I want to work in Southeast Asia post MBA. So in fact, even with INSEAD, that's why I chose Singapore as my home campus, because you do get that flexibility of either of the campuses. So it made sense for me to be in this geography.
Abhimanyu, I just come to the last question of this segment. Now, GMAT is always a hard battle, and this is exactly something that people are scared of. And people have tried, they usually try, like, they give multiple attempts. I know people who've, because the GMAT or low score, they've not been able to apply to so many good schools that they actually saw themselves going to. Now, how did the GMAT experience work for you? And specifically to INSEAD, do you think that INSEAD actually pays a lot of attention to the GMAT score?
So I should add a caveat here. I actually gave the GRE. I didn't give the GMAT. So I applied with a GRE score to INSEAD, and I gave my GRE nearly 2 years ago before I applied. So I used the old score. It was 330, so it fit the INSEAD category, requirement of being above the 80% percentile. So it fit that. So I think for me, I'm not sure if this is the best question for me, because I had, like, if you see my profile, it has many elements. So for them, it could have been, hey, it's unique profile, a lot of different experiences. It could also be, hey, he's got a good enough score as well, so he can handle the quant side of the program. So that is very important. Yes, you need to really be able to handle the quant side. So I think it's just like it's like a minimum requirement. Like, okay, 330 or 730 or 710, as long as this person appears like they can handle the quant side and have decent verbal and communication skills, that's it. The rest of the profile is as important, if not more, because they want to see if you're well-rounded or not. So that's really important. So I wouldn't say that GMAT is everything or the GRE is everything, but I would say that you want one foot into the door. It's one way of going about it.
Got it. I think.
And Ajinkya, you just want to top it off with any additional comments you might have on this?
Yeah, I mean, see, like as you mentioned, I gave GMAT thrice. and across multiple venues as well. I gave once in Singapore, once in India. So, I mean, I tried all sorts and ways to try and see how to boost up the score. But after a point of time, you kind of reach that stage that you know that it's not really reflecting. It's not about your capability. It's just about, you know, how well you can take that test. It's a dynamic test, so you might get, you know, 740, 760s, or even 780s in the preparatory test. But come test day, there are other factors which come into play, and you just may not get that score that you want. But which is fine. So, but I mean, if I have to add my 2 cents here, I feel that especially when it comes to US schools, GMAT plays a lot more of a part in that entire shortlisting process, and especially when you're applying from a very competitive market like India, or especially if you're coming from an engineering background, which is very competitive. But with non-US schools and specific to INSEAD, the overall profile plays a very big role. So definitely they would like to see that, you know, whether you have had a unique experience or something which you have done differently, or any other peaks that they can see in a profile. And as long as you are within that GMAT threshold, which is within that average, I think they will definitely consider you as a good candidate.
Great. I think Ajinkya and Avenue, from both your answers, one key theme that is emerging and a lot of people keep mentioning it is, these international schools are looking for all-round profile, and GMAT, while it may be an important criteria, is not the only criteria. And depending on the schools and regions, some schools are more heavy on GMAT and some are not. So thanks a lot for your answer. And which brings us to the end of our section 1.
All right, let's begin our second section here, which is demystifying the application. And this is where we go deep with the individual components of an NCR application. So I'm going to pick up with Abhimanyu here. So now NCR is a tricky application. I mean, I've been through the process as well, and I know there are so many different elements to the overall application for NCR as well, and requires a lot of work. Firstly, can you please summarize all the components for our viewers?
Okay, so basic details, etc., all of that aside, we're mentioning your education. Apart from that, it's the languages piece that you need to focus on, because you need to declare 2 languages. So make sure you're very clear about, what your native language is. I would say don't be bravado and say, hey, listen, English is my native language, because then you will have to prove whatever your mother tongue is or whatever other languages, you have to prove that through an entry level certification. So if Hindi or Telugu or Tamil, whatever is your native language, please pick that. They will not test you on that. All right. Then your English, etc., they can always prove through your transcripts. So university transcripts, you can always prove through that. So do that. After that, now we come to the essays. There are the whole job description essays where they talk to you about your current role, what you're doing, your path till that point, and if you were to stick, if you were not to do an MBA, what your career path would be. Post that is the motivational essays, which actually require you really think about your life and what you've done so far. So your strengths, your weaknesses, any unique experiences that you had, and where INSEAD features and all of that. So it's so in total there are 6 essays that you have to think about. So they do take a considerable amount of time, and for me personally, those 6 essays formed the application for many other institutions. So I used INSEAD as my base, and I was able to do a lot more universities because of that. And after that, it's just, your referees, you need to submit to referees their information. They do the recommendations, which is all completely online. And make sure that your recommenders are given sufficient time to do so, because from what I've heard, it's very extensive, and the referee had to really think a lot before submitting the recommendation. So there's that, and then of course, post that there is the video interview process, where it's on the basis of Kira Talent. I think that's what the platform is called, where you're asked 4 sets of questions, and they're like short, 45 seconds each. You can submit your answers on the platform. They give you enough time to practice, so there's infinite practice time. But after a while, you kind of just bite the bullet and you just give it. They want to see you being yourself. So that in a way sums up the whole application process.
Very nicely summarized, and sounds like an extremely daunting application. But for our viewers, I think Abhimanyu has done a fine job of summarizing the different components. Shifting gears, Ajinkya, if I could, come to you and ask you about the interview. Could you summarize your interview experience per se? How should one prepare for the interview? What kind of preparation you did? What is a typical INSEAD interview look like? I believe INSEAD has 2 rounds of interviews, so something around the interview experience.
Sure. So with INSEAD, there are two interviews which happen. And typically, what we have seen and even I experienced is one is a very recent alum, like who has just maybe passed out of the university in couple of years, and one is a relatively senior alum. Uh, at times, it also is the case that one of them will be matching either your pre-MBA profile or post-MBA plans, and the other one will be quite different, drastically different to what you are doing. So what they're trying to see is the person who is like the recent alum will be more acquainted with how much research you have done about the school in terms of what activities, how do you see yourself contributing to the INSEAD experience, what you bring to the table. And the senior alum will more gauge you in terms of the validity of your post MBA plans and have you thought through the entire piece. Like you can't really be going into an MBA school, especially a 10-month school, and not knowing at all that what you plan to do after the 10 months. So they will gauge, how realistic your plans are, what kind of success you are targeting, and they will gauge you on that piece. But having said that, I mean, both interviews are for me and what I have also heard from others were very conversational in nature. So it is more of just validating that whatever you have put in the essays and your application is the person that you are, and not somebody who has filled in probably something else and it's a different story that you are saying. So it's more of a validation piece. And they will always they'll share their experiences through the entire interview process, and they will have a lot of inputs as well. So it's I would say it's a very nice experience. Even for me, the interviews went on for 1.5 2 hours as well. So it just went into a nice discussion with the alumni which was there. uh, in terms of preparation, I would just say that know your application, the essays, the stories that you have put in, just go through, because there is a bit of time between when you submit the application and when the interviews actually happen. So oftentimes you may not recollect, or you might, because you're probably applying to multiple schools or you're doing other things. So it's important that you know what stories you have put in, you think through some of the backstories, and you are able to bring it when you have that conversation with the alumni.
Well, I think longer interviews are always a good sign. So it definitely seems like you nailed both your interviews because they went on for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's amazing for sure. I mean, totally relatable as well. Abhimanyu, you also mentioned the video essays part of it as part of the main application, right? I'm just gonna delve a little deeper here with the video essays and any advice or any tips additionally that you can give to the prospects on how do they record a more compelling video essay? What is it that they can actually do to help themselves make a more compelling draft?
Okay, so one of the things that I did do was I tried to first of all find a list of questions online if someone had given it, so get an idea of what are the type of questions that are asked. And some of the questions are repetitive, so you can just make bullet points. Don't try to, for example, have the complete answers written down because it's going to appear like you're reading, and that's not what they want to see. It has to be, they want to see more something more improvised than something which has coherent structure. You already know that there's a star format to doing your MBA essays or your interview or your interview answers. So it's the same format here. Make sure that you have a situation in hand. There was a task, there was an action, and what the result was, and you have to condense that within 60 seconds. So now to get to that point, you need to make sure that your points are jotted down, whether it's the practice questions or when you get the actual questions itself. In terms of the practice questions, like I said, there is no time limit. You can do it however many times you want. Keep, I would say, do at least 4 or 5 rounds where you just practice looking at yourself in a video. All right, and recording it and trying to time yourself in such a way that you know that within 60 seconds I can tell them the entire story of whatever I'm trying to portray. The questions themselves, it can really change. So for example, I may have prepared on why INSEAD, but I was asked about ethical leadership. So then I need to be able to switch gears and be like, okay, what are my thoughts on ethical leadership? And don't try to Google it. What is it according to you? What does that topic mean to you? Because that's what they want to see. So I would say that try to really think about your experiences. You're given 45 seconds to prepare. So make sure that you have a lot of the stories in mind, and you're able to put your points down and then convey that. So it's really about, one, the practice. Do it as many times as you can. Have your concise points ready, not the actual answers themselves, and be ready to be able to connect the dots within a space of 60 seconds. That's how you kind of go about the whole process.
Great tips coming out there, Abhimanyu. Thanks a lot for running us through your video interview questions, and thanks both of you for summarizing the INSEAD application. Moving on, this brings us to our third section of the video and the interview, which is called Decoding the Program. So maybe Ajinkya, you could start this section. INSEAD is a very complex program, if I could say. There are two intakes, there are also two campuses. So if I could ask you about the two campus structure, how does that play in terms of selection? Does the campus have any kind of bearing in terms of the selection process? Also, there are two more campuses that INSEAD has, which is one in Middle East and one in San Francisco, which is a new campus. So what kind of support system is available from the different campuses, and what kind of bearing it has in terms of the selection process?
Right. So, I mean, the short answer for this in terms of the selection process is it does not play a role, because the way they do it, while you do get to make a preference of whether you want to start in Fontainebleau or whether you want to start in Singapore, or your preference is either. So you do get to choose that. But the way they fill it is definitely in terms of, it depends on which town you're applying and the number of spots which are vacant for that particular campus. But that being said, if you are a candidate that INSEAD really wants to take ahead, then they would still bring you on board. So it's not the case that if you are selected Singapore and there is no space in Singapore, then you will not get admitted. That's not the way it works. So be rest assured on that. But I would say that, of course, while selecting, be mindful of the fact, and more so now in the post-COVID world where you don't know whether you will be able to do those campus exchanges, especially for the next 1 or 2 intakes, or where you want to start, depending upon where you want to end up in. So it might play an important role now, especially. In terms of the other campuses where you mentioned Middle East, yes, there is a campus and you do get to have a campus exchange there. So the way this works is for the 10-month program, it is broken into 2 months each. So 2 months constitute 1 period. So there are total 5 periods. The first 4 months or 2 periods are you will spend at your home campus, the one which you're allotted to. The next 6 months depends upon completely upon you. So during the second period, you will need to fill in something which is bidding. So you'll get certain points. You have to bid for a specific campus, or you will also need to use those points to select either electives or some of those tracks. So you need to work out which period you need to be where, and then you can bid for those points. If you're successful, then you get to either go for a campus exchange to the other campus, or Middle East as well, where Middle East, I believe, so it depends on which intake you come in as well, but uh, uh, certain periods you will get to exchange with the Middle East campus. San Francisco, as of now, it's not for campus exchange. It is more of a research hub. Not maybe in the future that might open up, but at this stage, it is not something which is open for exchanges. So that would be the long answer of it. I hope that answers.
It does, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you've
Uh,
summarized it well. Yeah, Abhimanyu, you
Can
have
I just
something to say.
add? I'll just add on to what Ajinkya said. So yeah, for the Middle East exchange, it usually happens if you're part of the September intake. So and you're graduating in July. So it's not really available to people who start in January, because it's January and February that you get to spend time in the Middle East in the Abu Dhabi campus. For the San Francisco campus, it's, as he said, it's very research based right now. So it's called the Business Innovation Hub, and they only do, I think, at this moment, executive development programs. So it's not really open to MBA students at this point.
Right.
Got it.
So,
So also, I think then you've really said that the campuses, even though they're interconnected, the students, they still need to go through this bidding process, which mostly B-school students do for their exchange programs anyways. So students should consider this like an exchange program and then go through a proper bidding process within school. Perfect. So Abhimanyu, I'm just going to come to you. Ajinkya's sort of answered this question in the previous section, but for you, I want to understand now. INSEAD again is a very fast-paced MBA. This is 10 months. People would not even they might not even know where the time flies, and 10 months is over in no time. So, what is your view of fast-paced MBA like INSEAD? How did you select a fast-paced MBA?
So basically, building on Ajinkya's point, yes, it's quick on return on investment. So, you're only out of the job market for a year, which is relevant to me because I've had an eclectic experience where I haven't gone beyond 2 years at any particular organization I've worked at. And I've studied in the middle as well. So for me, it just made a lot more sense to not be out of the job market for too long. So that was one reason. The quick return on investment is very important because you don't want interest accumulating on your loan for the next 2 years, and you don't want to be paying that off while you're studying. So you'd rather be out of it for a year and then pay it as quickly as possible. So that's one element to think about. And secondly, fast-paced really depends on the way you perceive it. So you're going to enter an economy which is going to be fast anyway, because post COVID, when things do pick up, things will change, and things have already been changing very dramatically. So you need to be flexible enough to be able to balance and adjust to whatever your skill set is and whatever the situation is. So coming to the whole 10 months that you have, there'll be courses, there'll be sessions you need to go for, there'll be career counseling sessions, etc., which you need to balance, and you only have 10 months to do so. So you'll quickly weed out what you don't want to do. So that's very important. I think sometimes when you have too much time, there's an element of you thinking there is that time, which may not be the case. So 10 months really makes you focus very quick, and you're really quick to kind of, for example, if you don't want to do consulting, it'll become very evident very quickly. So okay, I can quit, I can take consulting out, I can focus on something that I really want to do. So that's what the course gives you, whether you think it's fast paced or the right pace, or this is even slow for me. It really depends. So it really it's dependent on what you want out from the program. And if that's something that you think that 10 months, the duration doesn't matter, what I'm getting within that is the ability to balance things in life, yeah, I would go ahead and do the 10 months. So that's my two pieces.
Sure. I think what you said is 10 months will not only help you optimize your MBA in terms of ROI point of view, but it would also push you to, manage time and really learn to adapt fast, because in current times, things are changing very quickly. So it is one of the best programs. So I'm sure there is no reason to complain. If people have been doing it for years, they're managing the show pretty well for sure. Ajinkya, if I could, come to you and ask you the next question. I think briefly we spoke about the language part of it, and Abhimanyu touched upon it. But if I could, ask you, how does this language, because from what we understand, I think INSEAD requires that one needs to have at least 2 languages while entering and at least 3 languages while exiting. So 2 questions. Is learning a new language in 10 months very intimidating? Second, do the Indian regional languages like Marathi, Telugu, and some of these regional languages, do they qualify for the third language requirement? Because I believe Hindi is definitely one of the languages that qualifies, right?
Yeah, so yes, I mean, there is the requirement of the third language, but you don't really need to do it within the 10 months. So the way it works is before the program starts, you're free to, so you need to be A2 level certified for the third language. Now, in order to get that A2 certification before even the course starts, you can do independently testing with any of the associations or any of the probably institutes where you can get this language tested and get that A2 certificate. And once you give it to your admissions officer, if it's accepted, then I mean you are through. You don't really need to do anything during the course in that point. Or there is also a separate language intensive course that INSEAD organizes before the course starts. So about 15 days before, there is a language intensive course you need to register for, and you can pick up that within that particular, whichever language you have chosen within that particular course, and give again the examination before the course starts in the launch week itself. If you clear that, then again you're good to go. But then if you don't do either of this stuff, then yes, it's mandatory required that then you take those classes along with your academic schedule within those 10 months and ensure that you do get cleared, because you don't want your MBA degree to be stuck just because you didn't do the third language. And my 2 cents would be definitely try and get this language sorted as early as possible, because naturally with a short period of 10 months with having multiple priorities, you don't want that language piece again to be something that you spend a lot of time on. Coming to specifically to like Indian languages, so there is a big language guidebook, big policy that INSEAD has. But the gist of it is that it's very case to case basis. So as you mentioned, like Marathi and Hindi, so linguistically similar languages are not accepted as different languages. So Marathi and Hindi won't qualify as two separate languages. But let's say if you're something of, let's say, Bengali and probably Hindi or Gujarati or something of that sort, then you might make a case and that might be accepted as a separate language. So you really need to see what your, I think Abhimanyu touched upon this as well, so what is your native language and what are the other two languages, and are they linguistically different to be accepted as the third language?
Got it. Got it. So I think students, they must be very, very careful. They've got to be very careful about following the guidelines and the policies that NCR has laid out about languages, and they have to prove to the school that these are very different languages and they have very different variations and do not really originate from one another. And for the third language, as you mentioned, so NCR does support a lot of classes and they would give you the required courses if you're interested, but minimum level requirement to graduate from the course is A2, right? Perfect. So I think this wraps up this section as well, and I think been a great section. We've done it for the first time actually, and I think it's gone really well. Thank you so much for your insights. Let's move on to the next segment here. We call it support and guidance, and this is where we understand the external support that you guys sought for creating the NCR applications. So, Abhimanyu, let me start with you. Just a simple question. Did you seek any external help when applying to NCR or other schools that you applied to?
Yes, I did. So I basically started targeting INSEAD at least a year and a half before I even applied to the institute. And by that time, I was already liaising with a consulting agency to kind of help with my application and to build my story. So yeah.
So you mind elaborating on how did you actually go about the process of seeking this help?
Okay, so there are a lot of agencies out there, and it's really important to pick someone that who understands your story and helps you get to where you need to, and kind of just advise you at that point, not force you down a particular direction. So I did speak to multiple consulting agencies before I picked my admissions consultant, and the most important part of why I picked them was for the simple reason that the story itself, they helped me flesh it out. So I had a myriad of experiences that I wanted to talk about, and it was about how do I bring this story together. So I think the first 4 or 5 months, because I started, like I said, a year and a half in advance, it was just trying to understand what my story is and what my end goal could be, because there are multiple areas I could have taken my career's direction, and I could have been like, hey, after music, I might want to go back into consulting because I found that consulting is what I want to do. But it really depends on how they're helping you build your story. And for specifically for NCR, it was understanding, bringing their expertise in the sense that what do they know about the school and how can they marry it to what my profile and what my story is. And of course, it was very easy to highlight that, okay, NCR likes unique profiles and they appreciate diversity, but at the same time, they want to see someone who has a career goal and who understands that within 10 months, what are you going to get out of it? So for me, the consultant kind of helped cut out a lot of the riffraff that I wanted to talk about. I am, like, for example, I am very verbose in nature. I wanted to write a lot of stuff, but you have 500 words to tell them a story. And that story has to be convincing. So you can't go about endless conversations about your experiences, which then don't lead to somewhere like that. You don't see an end goal. So, for example, if you're talking about your strengths and weaknesses, you go through your entire story, you find out particular instances that, for example, have a theme that, okay, maybe I don't listen a lot in life, and that is a weakness. So then you try to bring those stories out. Or, I'm a very hard worker, I bring more to the table, I go beyond my ambit. So you bring those stories out in terms of strengths. So a consultant can help you do that. Or even if you get your friends and families to review, people who really understand you, they can also help. But for me, fresh and third person's perspective was very important because you can build yourself up. My profile is unique, but then someone can come and tell you, yeah, but what makes it unique? You may think you're unique, but you're not telling your story properly enough. So it's this art of storytelling, which consultants can help with.
Right. So the experience does count for something, and if the consultant is a good match for you and you feel convinced, I think Abhimanyu has clearly stated that a consultant can help you, bridge the gap between the multiple aspects in your profile and connect the dots to build a compelling story for the adcom and connect all the pieces. Because, like Abhimanyu mentioned, there has to be a broad theme to your entire application. While these may be individual questions, you need to follow that positioning story that you're going ahead and applying with. So thanks a lot for that, Abhimanyu. Ajinkya, if I could, pick the last piece from what Abhimanyu ended with. He said, while the consultant really helped him, there could be friends and family also that are around you who could really play that role that a consultant plays. So if I could ask you, did you take a consultant? And if you did, what was the kind of role that consultant played in your application, and how much of the inputs and support came from your family and friends? It could be your seniors from school, college, whatever. So what was the support system that you had for your application?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Abhimanyu summarized pretty well. Even I took a consultant, and I think Abhimanyu summarized quite well in terms of what kind of inputs the consultant brings in. So it's a matter of perception as well. So they just bringing a different perspective or a twist to the story that you are thinking in a certain way, but you just need a different perspective to look at the same story, and then you yourself also able to connect the dot that yes, this makes sense. So it really helped from that angle to build the entire storyline, to connect those dots, to see what is important and what is not important, or something that is very common and you might just leave it out, even though you might be feeling that it's important, but it's something that everybody is probably putting it in their application. So it just helps to have that level of discussion. Apart from that, definitely family played a big role, because see, there are a lot of incidences that happen in 26, 27 years. Probably you also might have forgotten certain incidences. So it just helps to have that discussion, to remember those incidences, see what you can take from it, or also run your essays through them, because a lot of times you also tend to put in certain jargon. When you work even with a consultant, I would say for a long period of time, even the consultant, probably it's human nature to start having certain bias and kind of overlooking certain things. But when a different person sees it, they can say that I don't understand what you have written. What does this word mean, or what does this incident mean? So that helps to bring in that level of perspectives. And also, I would stress that recent alumni of the school, or even the students who are currently in your target school, like even for INSEAD. So I reached out to a couple of the students who are currently at INSEAD. Of course, I wouldn't recommend to blindly go on LinkedIn and just put in your essays or stories there, but kind of have those connects. If there is something common, reach out to them, ask for like some time, and I'm sure that some or the other will be more than willing to help you out. So I ran my essays through them, and I got a lot of good insights as well, because we are the ones who are actually there at the school, so they know certain things, certain specific insights, and are able to give a different perspective to your overall application. So that, I believe, is a very important component, something which is often overlooked, but something which might add a lot of value to the your final output of the essays.
I think very similar insights coming from both the guys. They both, even though they worked with consultants, it was very, very important that they reached out to their internal network, which was basically the school seniors or alums or even friends and family, because the kind of value that they can add is again unmatchable. And because they know you so well, they can also bring out certain sides, certain facets of your personality, which a consultant might not be able to. So again, I think very insightful overall the session, and it wraps up this particular segment.
Great, another good session with you, Ajinkya and Abhimanyu. Thanks a lot. We'll move on to our next section, which is called Busting the Myths. And Ajinkya, maybe you could start this one. There are a lot of myths out there about applying to an international MBA. Could I ask you to, bust some of the myths that you encountered during your process of going through the application stages, not just to INSEAD, but in general to other schools?
Yeah, so one I think we already covered, but I would still like to stress that is just don't go by the rankings of the schools. lot of times, it's easy to get swayed by that, but at the end of the day, fit makes a lot of difference. So take your time to really research the school, and not just put your stories out there and assume that the same story is going to work for every school that you put in. So you really need to see how you fit into that school, how you're going to utilize the resources of that school, and be realistic of the transition that you're trying to make. Because if you don't do that, then you might have a stellar profile, but still you are not going to go through any of the schools if they don't really see that you have done the required research. That's the first part. The second part is, it makes sense to apply early as well. So there are a lot of debates, and even I used to kind of, while strategizing for which rounds to apply for, and which rounds to avoid. So it definitely makes sense to apply in the first couple of rounds, especially if you're coming on from an overrepresented or a very competitive kind of market. And also it helps in terms of scholarships. Like for INSEAD, if you apply for round 1 and round 2, then you still have a shot of applying for scholarships, which of course require separate essays, but you still at least have a shot for it. But if you apply for the later rounds, naturally you won't have that opportunity itself to apply. So think through your strategy of which schools you want to apply when, and prioritize the schools that you consider yourself as a combination of ambitious, but at the some combination of certain schools which you feel that you will which are safe bet for you as well.
Great, very well said. Uh, Abhimanyu, just coming to you and asking you a very specific thing about INSEAD. And now, I'm not sure if this is a myth, but probably if it is, you can bust it here. Now, INSEAD is known for its international curriculum and diversity that the school offers, right? And I think I've personally spoken to so many people who've said that if you do not have an international experience and you have not traveled or lived in different geographies or worked there, you might not be a very good fit. Now, do you think that's true about INSEAD? And how much do they really value the international experience overall?
I think to
Before
an
you,
extent it is
before
true.
you, Abhinay,
Yeah.
before you answer, if I could just add on to Abhinav's question, in case if, while we all know that INSEAD is very heavy on international experience, in case if a person has a otherwise very strong profile, but for some reason hasn't had the opportunity to work across different countries or live across different countries, are there those few exceptions out there that who have a domestic profile but still have a strong candidature?
I think so. To an extent, it is true that they do value international experience, whether it's you studying abroad or you having worked abroad. Now, the reason you have to understand the reason behind why they want it, because you're going to enter a cohort which is very diverse in terms of nationalities, backgrounds, work experiences, and they want to see that have you one had a chance to experience a different culture, and then what did you do when you were a part of it? Because they want to see in the sense that can you build a sense of camaraderie, can you respect someone else's views and biases, and then can you then debunk those stereotypes that you may have of a certain of a region or a certain set of people. So that's very important to them. Coming to, for example, someone who's only, for example, say lived in India or one particular place, if you worked with a global company, there is a chance that you have had exposure to people who are not in your immediate vicinity, so that they do take into consideration. There are instances, and this is purely anecdotal, where someone has said that was working for an international company but work across different regions in India, and as we know, regions in India are very diverse. So different, every 150 kilometers there's a new language that you have to experience, and then with that there are different customs. So if you can tell a compelling story of how you manage that diversity, they will take that into account. So it's not unheard of, that you haven't ventured outside of India, but you have, you can tell them a story of how you manage diversity. So that's where it's coming from. So yeah, to wrap it up, international expertise is experience is valued, but it's also about how you talk about diversity and how you've experienced diversity. So that's something that they're really looking for.
Great. I really like the part that you mentioned about what is the importance of international experience and why is it needed. So it is not just for the namesake that they want international experience. There is a rationale behind it that you need to work in teams and you need to work with people across from different countries, different religions, different nationalities. So for people who may not have for some reason got that international experience by way of living abroad, I think Abhimanyu wrapped it up quite well, that if you can demonstrate that you've experienced diversity in some other form, and you will be able to adjust to the diversity that INSEAD puts you in. I think when you clearly said that there are those odd exceptions. Another great section, Ajinkya and Abhimanyu.
All right, we are very close to the end and we are at our last section. This has been a great session. Uh, so this section is actually called Words of Wisdom. And I'm actually going to start with Ajinkya here. So Ajinkya, top two, three suggestions, your words of wisdom for aspirants who really want to apply to INSEAD and make it.
Right. So I would say the first one would be, and especially in current times, is uh, think through where you want to recruit post MBA. Think through why you want to do the MBA in the first place, especially for a fast-paced program and a 10-month program like INSEAD. You probably won't have that much liberty to move around, explore too many things, or do that internship of 12, 14 weeks and then figure out what you want to do. So you do need to come in with a certain mindset, or at least shortlisted options, that this is what you want to do. So be clear on that, because it's very easy that once the program starts, you will get lost with the amount of academic workload and multiple priorities which will come in. That is the first piece. Second piece, I would say, and which makes a lot more sense, especially in the current situation, is think through wherever you want to recruit in, think through the visa issues and the policies which are in place currently. The travel restrictions will be there for a longer while. There is unemployment is rising in almost all the countries, so the countries will have a tendency of kind of having a local first approach. So think through whether you are flexible enough to accommodate all those changes, flexible in terms of geography, and apply accordingly, and also choose your campus accordingly when you're selecting either be it Singapore or Fontainebleau. And the third piece, but which is more general, I would say, is don't get bogged down by failures, especially in terms of applying this process, because this entire process is quite intense. You are juggling, you are working as well, you are juggling multiple applications, and each application you put in your heart and soul. So, but at times it just doesn't go through for multiple reasons, which does not mean that your candidature is not good enough. So don't get bogged down by that, and just try and find that right fit, that connection with the school, and go through with your application something that you believe in. And I'm sure that once it fits, the school will also see value in it and bring you on board, especially for a school like INSEAD, which sees a complete rounded application.
That's indeed great words of wisdom coming out of Ajinkya, and you touched upon a lot of points. Abhimanyu, if I could ask you the same question, would you like to share your 2 cents on the advice for the aspiring applicants out there?
Okay. So first, in general, you should be very honest with yourself about what the MBA will do for your career. Okay, be very honest in terms of you taking stock of where you are, what the MBA will do, or that institution will do, and what happens after that. At least have a semblance of an idea, because if you go in with a half-formed idea, it's not going to work out. And if it does end in failure, there'll be multiple reasons why, but let that not be your whole approach to doing why you applied to the first place. Let that not be a problem. Let the institution not being a fit, or for whatever other reason, let that be something that you can look at, because what you can control is your own story and your own aspirations and your own reasons for doing the MBA. So that is very important. Secondly, as Ajinkya mentioned, handling disappointment is very important, because you will apply to multiple places, and you need to learn to deal with there may be instance that 4 universities did not work out, and then the fifth one does. So you shouldn't lose hope until you've completely exhausted your avenues. Don't necessarily settle. Don't just choose a business school because I have to do an MBA, let it be wherever. If it's not something that matches up to what you aspire to be and what an institution can do for you, then you're best waiting and finding an alternative. And I can tell you from experience, because this was the second time I was applying for an MBA. I've been through one entire process before where I've gone through 3 rounds of applications and I haven't made it anywhere. And I waited 2 years before applying again, and that I spent that time figuring out, okay, what may have gone wrong and what do I need to work on in terms of my own skill set to then show someone, give them a credible idea of what an MBA can do for me. So that was again very important. And third, as I've already mentioned before, cultural fit is very important. There may be rankings. I'll just tell you one element of the story. It's not the entire picture. So you need to really speak to people, speak to alumni, speak to the professors, whoever you can get in touch with. Do that. It may be awkward to approach them on LinkedIn, but just do it, because there is, I mean, worst case they don't reply, but then everyone doesn't reply. It's fine. All right, though at least you know who does, and that may be something that really appeals to you, because then you figure out it's important to me that people respond. And this school, the people seem like they really do want to talk to me about the whole school, about their experiences. So don't discount cultural fit. It's very important. That would be my 3 cents, I guess, this scenario.
Well, pearls of wisdom indeed from Abhimanyu as well. I think that's the beauty of the overall session as well. That two very diverse candidates putting their unique perspectives on the table, and I hope there are enough takers out there who would really benefit from either Ajinkya's or Abhimanyu's story. I think this has been one of the best sessions I've personally done, and really it's been overwhelming. It's been great. Thank you so much, both you guys, for being here with us. And this wraps up our session for today. Anand, do you have anything to say?
No, I think I would just echo what you said. I think this has been a very uh, interesting chat and very informative session to hear from both of you. And great stories, great diversity coming out of the two of you. And thanks a lot for taking the time out of your busy schedule, sitting with us over a weekend, for sharing your experiences. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Good luck,
guys.
guys. Good luck for your upcoming journeys, and we really hope they are as transformational as you want them to be.